He broke my heart, so I built a life he'll never be part of. The story opens with the male narrator reflecting on a love that ended abruptly, leaving a quiet ache he carries even now. He's in his mid-20s, emotionally observant, and naturally introspective. The heartbreak is fresh in memory, though time has dulled its sharpest edges. He recalls the moments when things felt right, her hand brushing his, the warmth of her smile, the soft timbre of her voice during a late-night conversation, but now those memories sting. There's a particular evening that lingers in his mind. The room had been dimly lit, the faint glow of a desk lamp illuminating her profile. Her hand had rested lightly on his forearm, and the steady thrum of her heartbeat against his fingers felt like an unspoken promise. Yet, in the space of a few words, everything changed. Her gaze had drifted away, and the distance that formed between them was palpable. He remembers how the air had seemed heavier, the silence stretching between them longer than the words themselves. That was the night he realized love could slip away without a fight, leaving only echoes. Now, in his small apartment, traces of that relationship remain in subtle ways: a scarf draped over a chair, a book she had lent him, the faint lingering scent of her perfume in the air. Every object carries memory, and each memory carries a pang. He runs his fingers over the coffee cup in his hand, noting how its warmth contrasts with the cold ache in his chest. There's a quiet bitterness in how ordinary life continues while his heart feels fractured. Physically, he notices the absence of touch in ways he hadn't before. He misses the simple gestures, the brush of her hand against his arm, the light resting of her head near his shoulder, the reassuring squeeze of fingers entwined. It's not lust but a quiet, intimate closeness that now feels painfully absent. He feels the void where her presence once was, the space around him heavy with silence. Emotionally, the narrator is grappling with a mixture of longing and self-preservation. He acknowledges the pain, but he also senses the necessity of moving forward. He spends long evenings walking through quiet streets or sitting at a cafe, watching couples with a strange combination of envy and detachment. In these moments, he notices small details: the warmth of a hand on a coat sleeve, laughter echoing across the table, the scent of coffee mingling with autumn air. These sensory experiences remind him of what he lost but also awaken a subtle hope, an awareness that tenderness exists in the world, even if he is not part of it yet. This first part establishes the emotional foundation: heartbreak, quiet reflection, and the beginning of a slow emotional journey. It prepares the audience to feel the depth of the narrator's sensitivity, making every subsequent touch, glance, and moment of connection with a new woman charged with anticipation. The fracture is not just a past event, it's the lens through which he will approach the next chapter of his life, cautious yet longing, broken yet quietly resilient. After the fracture of his first heartbreak, the narrator withdraws into himself, seeking safety and space to understand what went wrong. He's careful now, wary of the sting of disappointment, and yet the longing for connection lingers like a quiet undercurrent beneath his daily life. This retreat isn't dramatic. There are no grand gestures of isolation, but a subtle shift in how he moves through the world. His apartment becomes a sanctuary, a place where memories exist without interruption, where he can reflect without judgment, and where he can slowly rebuild his sense of self. Mornings are quiet. He brews coffee with deliberate care, savoring the warmth seeping through his hands and the rich aroma curling around him. It's a small comfort, but it's grounding. He often sits by the window, watching the city wake up, noting the soft light brushing rooftops, the rhythm of footsteps below, the distant hum of life continuing despite his inner turmoil. Every sensory detail, the chill of the early breeze, the faint scent of rain on asphalt, feels heightened, as if the world itself reminds him to stay present. He fills his days with subtle acts of self-growth. Perhaps he takes long walks in the park, notebook in hand, jotting down thoughts and observations. Sometimes, he lingers in quiet cafes, watching the ebb and flow of life around him. Couples pass by laughing, their hands brushing together, and he feels a pang, both of envy and of cautious hope. Even the smallest gestures of human connection remind him of what he's been missing, yet they also reinforce his resolve to heal before opening himself again. During this time, his emotional awareness deepens. He notices the way his chest tightens at memories of her touch, the warmth of her hand resting lightly on his, the subtle pressure of her head leaning near his shoulder. But now, he examines these feelings with introspection rather than desperation. He asks himself what he truly wants from love, what kind of emotional intimacy he is ready to receive, and what boundaries he needs to protect his heart. This reflection isn't painful in the raw sense, it's slow, meditative, and at times even comforting. There's a quiet tension between his desire for connection and his need for self-preservation. In moments of solitude, he feels the emptiness acutely, an apartment that echoes with absence, a favorite chair that no longer bears the warmth of shared presence. Yet, in the very act of noticing these small voids, he begins to reclaim himself. He learns to be comfortable in his own company, to find joy in small sensory pleasures, the warmth of sunlight on his skin, the scent of brewing coffee, the sound of rain tapping on the windowpane. By the end of this section, the audience should feel the narrator's slow emotional recovery. The heartbreak lingers, but it no longer defines him. He is quietly resilient, contemplative, and open to life's possibilities, setting the stage for the new encounters that will stir his guarded heart. The retreat is not a dead end, it is preparation, for love that will be earned and cherished, and for moments of intimacy that will carry the weight of real emotional connection. After months of retreat and quiet reflection, the narrator's life begins to brush against the possibility of new connection. He's learned to protect his heart, but he cannot escape the human need for companionship. This part marks the first step toward vulnerability, the tentative stirrings of curiosity and attraction, without rushing intimacy or overriding the slow burn pace. The encounter happens in an unassuming place, perhaps a bookstore with soft lighting, or a quiet gallery filled with muted colors and the gentle echo of footsteps. The atmosphere is calm, almost contemplative, allowing every glance and gesture to feel weighty. He notices her first from across the room, an older woman in her early 40s, graceful and confident, yet carrying a subtle air of vulnerability that mirrors his own guardedness. She moves with a natural elegance, fingers tracing the edge of a book, her posture relaxed but attentive. Their first exchange is brief and seemingly ordinary, a shared smile over reaching for the same book, a polite conversation about an author, a comment that sparks a quiet laugh. But these small moments carry enormous weight in a slow-burn narrative. He notices the softness in her tone, the way her eyes flicker toward his and linger a fraction longer than necessary. There's a subtle electricity, a spark that isn't spoken aloud but hangs between them, palpable in the space they occupy. Physicality is minimal yet deeply resonant. A handshake might linger a heartbeat too long, a casual brush of fingers when exchanging a book causes a shiver of awareness, or she tucks a strand of hair behind her ear while glancing at him. These touches are light, respectful, and entirely YouTube-safe, yet they are rich in emotional significance. Each contact is a revelation, the warmth of skin, the slight pressure, the unspoken acknowledgement of presence and mutual curiosity. Environment and sensory details amplify the tension. The faint smell of her perfume, earthy and slightly floral, lingers even as she steps away. The soft hum of background music, or the muted footsteps in the room seem to frame their interaction, creating a private world amid public space. He notices the texture of her clothing, the subtle tilt of her head, the gentle cadence of her laughter. Every detail etches itself into his memory, a mosaic of observation that deepens his fascination. Emotionally, the narrator experiences a mixture of wonder and hesitation. He is drawn to her confidence, her warmth, and the depth he senses behind her smile, yet he is acutely aware of the age difference and the walls he has built around his heart. The tension is not melodramatic, it is quiet, deliberate, and full of unspoken questions. Can he trust himself to be open again? Will she understand the fragility beneath his calm exterior? By the end of this part, the audience should feel the first seeds of a meaningful connection, curiosity, subtle desire, and the delicate stirrings of trust. It's a gentle, sensory-rich introduction that sets the stage for deeper emotional intimacy, shared laughter, and tentative closeness in the chapters to come. The story now enters a stage of quiet intensity. The narrator and the older woman, or women, have met, and the initial spark of curiosity has begun to grow into something more profound. This part is about subtle closeness, the push and pull of desire and restraint, and the emotional intimacy that forms without words. They share moments that seem ordinary on the surface. Long conversations over coffee, walking through quiet streets, laughing at shared observations, but each interaction is layered with meaning. The narrator notices the warmth in her expressions, the way her eyes soften when she listens, and the way her gestures are graceful yet unguarded. These small observations create tension, a longing that is both comforting and frightening, a desire tempered by caution. Physicality remains understated but emotionally charged. They might sit on a park bench with shoulders brushing lightly, the proximity generating a warmth that lingers in his chest. She may adjust her scarf, and their hands touch momentarily, a fleeting brush of fingers that sends a ripple of awareness through him. Or she might lean slightly closer to hear him better, and he senses the gentle heat radiating from her presence. Every touch, glance, and shift in posture is a silent conversation, full of implication and connection. Sensory detail heightens the tension. The faint scent of her perfume lingers in the air, blending with the crisp outdoor breeze during walks. The sunlight catches her hair at just the right angle, and he finds himself memorizing the curve of her cheek, the quiet rhythm of her smile. When she laughs, it's soft but resonant, and he notices how it lifts the weight of his cautious reserve. Even the way her voice shifts in quiet conversation, the subtle warmth in certain words, becomes a beacon he is drawn toward. Emotionally, this section explores vulnerability and hesitation. The narrator is aware of the age gap, his own lingering past heartbreak, and the slow rhythm with which he is allowing himself to feel again. Each interaction pulls him closer, yet he fears rushing or misreading her intentions. The tension is mutual. She, too, is navigating her desire and emotional caution, aware of the quiet intensity growing between them. This part is also about shared understanding and small confessions. Perhaps he tells her a personal anecdote about his past heartbreak, and she responds with quiet empathy, her hand briefly resting on his forearm as reassurance. Moments like these are understated but powerful, grounding their connection in emotional honesty rather than physical overture. By the end of this section, the audience should feel a rising emotional swell, the recognition that something significant is forming, yet neither is ready to fully surrender. It's a delicate, sensory-rich build, where proximity, touch, and shared attention carry the weight of burgeoning intimacy. The stage is set for confrontation with past fears and the eventual release of tension in the following chapters. By this stage, the narrator has grown more comfortable with the older woman, or women. Their connection is warm, tender, and charged with quiet tension, but the shadows of past heartbreak linger. This chapter is about vulnerability, reflection, and the difficult reckoning with the scars that have shaped him. The confrontation with the past doesn't have to be dramatic. It can appear subtly, through a casual comment, or a lingering thought. Perhaps the woman notices a fleeting hesitation in his demeanor when the conversation turns to love, or he catches himself retreating inward after a moment of closeness. There's a silent acknowledgement of history, the pain he endured, the trust he lost, and the guarded heart that now approaches connection cautiously. Emotionally, he wrestles with doubt and longing simultaneously. He remembers the fracture, the warmth of her hand, the gentle pressure of her head against his shoulder, the quiet laughter in the dark, and the sudden absence that followed. Those memories resurface in moments of shared presence with the new woman, making him acutely aware of what he risks if he opens himself fully. The tension arises from the fear that intimacy could hurt again, and yet from the undeniable desire to feel that closeness once more. Physicality in this chapter remains subtle, carrying emotional weight rather than sensuality. She might place a reassuring hand lightly on his shoulder when he speaks of the past, or their fingers accidentally brush while reaching for the same object. The warmth of her touch lingers, and he feels both comforted and nervous, the kind of friction that arises when emotional walls are gently pressed against. Even the smallest gestures, like a tilt of her head or the way she leans in slightly when listening, become charged with unspoken communication. Sensory-rich details highlight the intimacy of these moments. They may take a walk in the late afternoon, with the chill of autumn brushing against their skin. The fading sunlight casts a golden glow, making ordinary surroundings feel almost sacred. The quiet sound of leaves crunching underfoot, the subtle rustle of her scarf, the soft cadence of her voice as she reassures him, all combine to create an atmosphere where reflection and connection are inseparable. Conflict arises from honesty. Perhaps he shares a painful story about betrayal or disappointment, and she listens without judgment, offering empathy instead of solutions. Her understanding becomes a bridge across the chasm of his past hurt. He begins to recognize that vulnerability can be met with tenderness rather than rejection. This is a pivotal step. The emotional stakes are high, but so is the potential for meaningful intimacy. By the end of this part, the audience should feel the narrator teetering between caution and courage. The confrontation with the past is not resolved entirely, it is a process, but it sets the stage for a turning point in their relationship. The emotional groundwork has been laid. He is starting to trust again, and the tension between hesitation and desire is ready to bloom into a quiet, heartfelt climax in the following chapters. The story now reaches the emotional peak, the moment when the subtle tension and careful hesitation built over previous chapters come to a head. The narrator and the older woman, or women, have spent countless hours in conversation, shared laughter, and moments of quiet presence. Now, their connection is undeniable, and the weight of unspoken feelings hangs palpably between them. The scene could be set during a quiet evening, perhaps walking under the soft glow of street lamps or sitting together in a secluded corner of a cafe. There is a stillness in the air, a space that allows emotions to rise without interruption. Every glance, every shift in posture, every brush of a hand carries significance. The narrator notices how her presence affects him, the subtle warmth radiating from her, the slight tilt of her head when she smiles, the rhythm of her breathing when she leans just a fraction closer. Physical touch is gentle but loaded with meaning. Perhaps her hand rests lightly on his forearm during conversation, and he feels a surge of awareness, a jolt of emotional electricity that leaves him momentarily breathless. Or their knees touch under the table, a simple closeness that seems to speak louder than words. A quiet laugh shared, a hand briefly placed over his, a shoulder brushing against his. All these touches communicate a silent acknowledgement of desire and care, fully appropriate for a YouTube audience while remaining deeply intimate. Sensory details enrich the emotional tension. The faint scent of her perfume lingers, blending with the crisp evening air. The soft hum of city life surrounds them, yet it feels distant, as if the world has contracted around the two of them. Warm light spills across her face, highlighting the curve of her cheek and the sparkle in her eyes, making every subtle expression mesmerizing. Every small sensory impression becomes magnified, intensifying the emotional impact of the moment. Emotionally, this is the chapter where hesitation meets courage. The narrator is aware of his lingering fears from past heartbreak, but he also recognizes the depth of trust and connection he has built with her. There may be a pause, a moment of silence where words are unnecessary, and the audience can feel the unsaid, a mutual acknowledgement that both have been waiting for this, cautiously, patiently, and with a full awareness of their hearts. The emotional climax isn't about grand declarations, it's about recognition, acceptance, and the quiet surrender to feelings that have been nurtured slowly. Perhaps she leans slightly closer, and he senses the warmth of her hand near his. Perhaps their laughter softens into comfortable silence, and in that stillness, the emotional bond is solidified. The narrator's heart, once fragile and wary, now opens a little more, allowing himself to hope, to trust, and to feel the tender stirrings of love once again. By the end of this part, the audience should feel a profound sense of intimacy and anticipation, a readiness for emotional resolution. The tension has peaked, and what remains is the warmth of connection, the gentle promise of shared life, and the lingering, sweet awareness that something meaningful has begun. The story reaches its emotional resolution. The narrator and the older woman, or women, have navigated hesitation, heartbreak, and the fragile beginnings of trust. Now, there is a quiet, unspoken understanding between them, a mutual recognition of care, warmth, and the depth of connection that has grown slowly but steadily. This chapter is about settling into that intimacy, savoring the comfort of presence, and embracing a gentle, believable emotional closeness. The scene might take place in a softly lit living room, a quiet park bench at dusk, or a sunlit cafe corner, settings that evoke calm and warmth rather than drama. They sit near each other, shoulders lightly brushing, fingers occasionally grazing as if by accident. The narrator notices the subtle reassurance of her proximity, the warmth radiating from her body, the rhythm of her breathing, the soft weight of her hand resting near his. These touches, simple and safe, communicate trust and affection far more than words could. Sensory details enhance the intimacy. Perhaps the scent of her perfume mingles with the faint aroma of coffee or evening air, lingering like a comforting memory. The soft hum of distant activity frames their quiet world, while warm light spills across her face, catching the edges of her smile and the sparkle in her eyes. Even small, everyday actions, a brush of her hair from her face, the tilt of her head when listening, or the subtle press of her hand against his, carry profound emotional significance. Emotionally, the narrator is fully present, no longer guarded but thoughtful, appreciative, and gently exhilarated by the closeness he shares with her. The past heartbreak that once defined him now feels like a distant echo, replaced by hope and quiet joy. He senses the emotional equilibrium. The tension of the slow-burn romance has resolved into tender warmth, mutual understanding, and an intimate rhythm that feels natural and steady. If there are multiple women in the story, the resolution emphasizes harmony rather than rivalry. Each woman's presence is meaningful, and the narrator's connection with each is unique yet complementary. They share laughter, meaningful glances, and supportive gestures, hands lightly touching, shoulders brushing, smiles that convey both recognition and affection. There is no rush, no need to overstate emotions. The emotional payoff comes from the natural, human intimacy that has been carefully built over time. The climax of emotional resolution is subtle but powerful. Perhaps the narrator leans slightly closer, and she responds with a quiet, reassuring touch on his arm. Perhaps they share a moment of eye contact, long enough to communicate gratitude, trust, and mutual understanding. The world outside may continue its pace, but in this space, time slows. Their connection is the only thing that matters. By the end of this chapter, the audience should feel a profound sense of warmth, closure, and hope. The story leaves viewers with the quiet satisfaction of witnessing emotional growth, tender affection, and the beginning of a life built together, respectful, patient, and deeply felt. The heartbreak that once loomed over the narrator is now replaced by a carefully nurtured connection, one that promises intimacy, trust, and gentle love without rushing or forcing the pace.